She lay in the dirt, her arms twisted, shattered, broken. Not by accident, not in a fall, but by boys who laughed while they did it. "They broke me for fun," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. No one came. No one cared. She was 15, discarded like she didn't matter. Left to die under a cold sky, bones snapping inside her like dry twigs. But what she didn't know was that someone was coming. A man. A stranger. A cowboy with eyes that carried a storm, and a past more haunted than her own. He found her by accident, or maybe fate dragged him there. He picked up the girl they had destroyed, but what he saw in her brought back ghosts he had buried long ago. She thought he was just a quiet man on a horse, but he was more than that, much more. And the secret he carried would tear open a truth even more painful than the beating she had survived. This isn't just a story of pain. It's about the man who couldn't save his own sister, but swore he wouldn't let another girl die afraid. Stay with me. This story will break you, and then heal you. Before we dive deeper into this heart-wrenching story, if you believe in voices that often go unheard, if stories of survival, courage, and hidden pain speak to your soul, then please take a moment to subscribe to Legacy Ignited. Hit the like button, and follow for more powerful stories, just like this one. Every click helps us reach more hearts, and bring more forgotten voices into the light. The wind howled through the dry plains as the sun dipped low, casting long, blood-orange shadows across the dust. In the heart of nowhere, a young girl named Elsie lay curled beneath the charred skeleton of a tree, her arms twisted at angles that made even silence ache. Her dress was torn, blood dried stiff against the cotton. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "They broke me, just for fun." No one was around to hear her. No one except the coyotes waiting in the distance for her to stop breathing. She'd only been 15, a shadow of a girl raised in a cruel orphanage tucked behind the hills near Rattlesnake Ridge. It wasn't a home. It was a holding cell where the unwanted were shelved and silenced. Elsie had learned early how to stay quiet, how not to cry when they took her food or when the matron yanked her by the hair. But nothing could have prepared her for what the visiting ranch boys did that day. They weren't men, not really, but they wore spurs and smoked like armor and looked at her like she was less than a creature. It started with a dare. One boy said, "Bet she don't scream." The others laughed. Then came the rope, the chase, the punches, and finally the snap. Her arms, one, then the other, shattered like kindling under their boots. They howled with laughter. She didn't scream. She just bit down so hard on her lip that the blood spilled down her chin. When they grew bored, they left her in the dust like a broken doll with no more strings. Night crept in. Every breath was fire. Every thought blurred. She wanted to close her eyes forever. She whispered to the stars, not prayers, just apologies, for being born, for being weak, for not running faster. Her body trembled against the cold, her bones too broken to even curl into herself. The moon had just started its climb when she heard hooves. The sound was slow, deliberate, like a man with nowhere to be and no one waiting for him. She tried to lift her head, but agony pinned her down. Then the horse stopped. Silence again. She thought maybe it was a ghost, or worse, one of them returning for round two. But a pair of boots stepped into view. Dust-covered, worn, but quiet. Then came the voice, low, scratchy, and rough as gravel. "You alive?" She couldn't speak. She just blinked. The man crouched. A weathered face, sunburned and shadowed beneath a battered hat, came into focus. His eyes weren't soft. They were hard and haunted. But they didn't look through her. They saw her. Without another word, he scooped her up, and she blacked out from the pain. When she woke, it was still dark but warm. She lay on a bed of hay inside a small wooden cabin, wrapped in an old wool blanket. Her arms were splintered with rough-cut pine and bound with strips of linen that smelled like whiskey and herbs. A fire crackled near her feet. The cowboy sat across the room, staring into the flames, not watching her, not asking questions, just breathing like a man who hadn't slept in years. "Why'd you help me?" she finally rasped. He didn't answer right away. Then he muttered, "Didn't help you. Just didn't let you die." That was all he said that night. Over the next few days, the cowboy fed her broth, cleaned her wounds, and changed her splints. He never asked her name, never gave his. But she noticed things. How his hand shook sometimes when he touched her arms, how he flinched when she winced, how he stared at her scars like they echoed something inside him. One night, she caught him sitting outside, alone, his shirt off under the moonlight. Her breath caught. His back was a canvas of old wounds, deep, rope scars that crisscrossed like whiplashes from hell. No man earned marks like that without surviving something darker than the night. She wanted to ask, but the weight in his silence told her not to. Instead, she whispered from the doorway. They laughed while they did it, like it was a game. He didn't turn. People like that don't know pain. They just spread it. Her voice cracked. They said I was nothing. Said no one would care. The cowboy finally looked at her, his eyes burning. They were wrong. In that moment, she realized he wasn't just helping her heal. He was fighting something inside himself, something old and buried deep. Whatever had broken her, he had tasted worse. And for reasons he didn't speak, her survival mattered to him. The days stretched on. Her arms, though stiff and aching, began to mend. But the damage inside, the fear, the shame, the invisible bruises, those lingered. Sometimes she'd wake screaming, clawing the air. Every time, he was there, silent, still, steady, like a mountain refusing to fall. She began to talk more about the orphanage, about the cruel boys, about the emptiness she felt long before her bones snapped. He never judged. He just listened, with that same grim look like her words echoed his own nightmares. But then came the question she feared most. "Why were you out here alone?" she asked one morning, her arms now in softer wrappings. The cowboy paused, then stood. He walked to the door, opened it, and stared into the distance before replying. "Because once, I didn't save someone." His voice cracked, just once, like a fracture in stone. Before she could speak, he added, "You remind me of her." And then, for the first time, he walked away from the fire, leaving her not with answers, but with a chilling truth. She wasn't the only one haunted by brokenness. Those words hung in the air like smoke after fire, thick with meaning, heavy with pain. Elsie sat frozen by the hearth, staring at the door he had just walked through. The cabin felt colder without him, though the fire still burned. She clutched the blanket tighter around her healing arms, heart thudding. He hadn't just seen her pain, he recognized it. And that kind of knowing doesn't come without living through something just as dark. When the cowboy returned that evening, he didn't speak. He placed a small sack of dried apples and 2 tin cups on the table. Elsie watched his every movement. He looked the same, silent, tired, weathered, but something had shifted. The mask he wore so effortlessly had slipped, just for a moment, and now she couldn't stop wondering what lay behind it. She took a breath. "Her, the one I remind you of. What happened to her?" He didn't look up. "You don't want to know." "I do." He paused, then sat down across from her, elbows on the table, hands folded as if holding something sacred. The fire popped. Outside, an owl cried into the silence. Finally, his voice came low and strained. "She was 12. My sister. We grew up in a mining town where folks worked hard and died young. Our pa drank himself to death before we could even call him that. Our ma tried, but grief has sharp edges. I left when I was 16 to chase cattle work, told her I'd send money, said I'd come back." He blinked hard, his jaw tightening. "I didn't. Not in time." Elsie didn't breathe. He continued, "She ended up in a house like yours. One of those places that takes in the forgotten. But they don't care. Not really. They feed the kids just enough to keep them quiet and hidden. She tried to run. They caught her. Said she stole something. But I know better." His fists clenched. "They made an example of her. Beat her so bad, she couldn't walk. She died in a cold shed behind that place, alone, calling for me. They say she cried for her brother, the brother who never came." Silence wrapped the room in ice. Elsie whispered, "I'm so sorry." He nodded once, then stood and stoked the fire like he needed to do something with his hands before the memory swallowed him whole. "I came back too late. I put her in the ground myself. Been wandering ever since." Elsie wiped her eyes. That's why you helped me. He didn't turn. No, that's why I couldn't walk away. The next few days passed in heavy quiet. Her arms were still fragile, but healing well. The bruises on her soul, though, ran deeper. She began to notice the way he scanned the horizon every morning, like expecting something bad to find them. He never asked her to leave, but he never said she should stay, either. One afternoon, while he was chopping firewood out back, a sound cracked through the silence, a familiar, terrible sound. Horse hooves, fast and cruel. Elsie rushed to the window, blood draining from her face. 3 riders approached, dust trailing behind them like storm clouds. Her heart dropped. It was them, the boys who broke her. Older now, but unmistakable. One wore the same crooked grin. Another, the same silver belt buckle. The third, he was the ringleader. His cold blue eyes scanned the land like he owned it. Elsie backed away from the window, shaking. The cowboy returned, axe in hand. He saw her pale face, followed her eyes. You know them? She nodded. They're the ones. They think I'm dead. He looked outside, silent for a long moment. Then, without a word, he stepped out and closed the cabin door behind him. Elsie ran to the window again. The men dismounted, laughing, unaware. What's a ghost like you doing out here alone? One shouted. The cowboy stood tall. Come. Not alone. That made them pause. The ringleader squinted. You got company. He didn't reply. Another boy stepped forward. You seen a girl? Brown hair, real quiet? We lost her somewhere near here. The cowboy didn't blink. She's not lost. She's healing. The smiles faded. The ringleader's hand hovered near his holster. You got no idea who you're protecting, old man. I know exactly who I'm protecting. Tension split the air like a drawn gun. Then, fast as lightning, the cowboy reached for his belt, his hand not going for a gun, but for a folded paper. He tossed it at their feet. They looked down. A sketch. A wanted poster. The cowboy's name. One of the boys read aloud. Wade Callahan, former deputy turned outlaw fugitive for the murder of 3 men. The ringleader sneered. You killed them. Wade's voice was ice. They ran a home. Like hers. Like my sister's. I made sure it never opened again. A beat of silence. Then the cowboy stepped closer, fire in his eyes. So if you came here to finish what you started with that girl, I'll bury you beside the men who hurt mine. The boys looked shaken now. For the first time, unsure. We didn't know, one muttered. Wade's voice dropped to a whisper. Now you do. They backed away slowly, mounted up, and disappeared into the dust, their silence louder than any gunshot. Inside, Elsie sat in stunned awe, not just at what he'd done, but at who he really was. He wasn't just a cowboy. He was a man forged in grief and fire, a ghost walking among the living, carrying the pain of the past on his back like a burden he refused to set down. And yet, he had chosen to protect her, to stand between her and the monsters. When he stepped back into the cabin, he looked at her with tired eyes. They won't be back, he said. She stood, arms trembling but strong enough now to hold themselves. You lied to me. He raised an eyebrow. You didn't just not save someone once, she said softly. You've been saving people ever since. He didn't deny it. He just looked at her and said, You're not broken, Elsie. You were never broken. They just wanted you to believe you were. She stepped closer, tears in her eyes. And what about you? He smiled just barely. Some wounds don't close, but they remind you why you keep going. They sat by the fire, 2 souls bound by pain, but not defined by it. And for the first time in a long time, the night felt still, safe. Weeks passed, and the cabin no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning. Elsie's arms had healed enough for her to help with small chores, though she still winced when the cold touched the bones. Wade never spoke much about the past again, but his presence grew warmer. He taught her how to ride, how to track, and how to listen, not just with ears, but with instinct. She was learning to live again, not as a broken girl, but as someone who had survived the worst and still chose to rise. One morning, while mending a loose saddle strap, she looked up and asked, Do you think I'll ever stop remembering? Wade didn't answer right away. He sat beside her, gaze fixed on the distant hills. No, but it won't hurt the same. Memory becomes weight, not wound. You'll carry it, but it won't carry you. She nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand. The pain might never vanish, but it no longer controlled her. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and crimson, Elsie stood at the edge of the field where Wade often sat in silence. She approached him, holding something in her hand, a hand-carved wooden cross with a single name etched into the grain, Lila. She had found it in an old drawer beneath the bed. "She was your sister," Elsie said gently. Wade nodded. "I want to honor her." His jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "You already are." They buried the cross beneath the old willow tree behind the cabin. Wade didn't cry. He just stood with his hat pressed to his chest, eyes closed, lips moving in a whisper only the wind could hear. And beside him stood the girl who should have died, who lived because he refused to fail again. That night, she lit a lantern and placed it on the windowsill. "For every girl who never got out," she whispered. Wade came up behind her. "And for everyone who still can." She turned to him, voice full of quiet strength. "You gave me back more than my life. You gave me a reason not to be afraid of it." He looked at her, something soft breaking through his hardened stare. "And you gave me a reason to stop running." The fire crackled behind them. Outside, the plain stretched into the night, endless and quiet. They stood there, not as savior and victim, not as outlaw and orphan, but as two souls stitched together by pain, forgiveness, and the decision to keep living. Not broken, not lost, just healing, one breath at a time.